why the Matt McMahon era at LSU should likely be over, but more importantly, why it possibly won't be. We'll explain Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt McMahon. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get great podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. And as always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. Thank you for helping make the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. Thank you for watching weekdays on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. This is a question that I think a lot of LSU fans are asking on this day because LSU lost on Wednesday to a hapless Mississippi State team to fall to 1-7 in conference. And with that loss, LSU's chances of making the NCAA tournament for all intents and purposes are done. That means it'll be 4 years with the Matt McMahon era without making the big dance. And so naturally, a lot of people are asking the question, is this it for Matt McMahon? And that question is warranted because LSU Athletic Director Verge Ausberry a few weeks ago in an interview with The Advocate said that if Matt McMahon did not make the NCAA tournament this season, then they would reevaluate. The quote was, "We'll have to reevaluate." That was Verge Ausberry's quote just a few weeks ago when talking about this LSU basketball team. And you may be sitting there thinking, Matt, of course they weren't going to make the tournament. It's not that cut and dried. Remember, going into that game against Mississippi State on Wednesday, LSU was 1-6 in the league, but they still had 13 wins overall. They had a net ranking of 46. They were still very much in play. And remember, the committee does not look at a conference record. The committee doesn't care what your conference record is. They're looking at metrics in your overall wins. So there was a path through a manageable part of the league schedule plus the conference tournament where LSU could have gotten into the 18 to 20 win range, which would have put it in the conversation to be a bubble team. Again, I'm not suggesting it was likely or predicting that it was going to happen, but there was a plausible path for LSU to make the NCAA tournament. Well, losing that game to Mississippi State now, for all intents and purposes, it is over. I mean, that was a game at home against arguably the most winnable game left on your schedule. You were a 7.5-point favorite on your home floor against a team that had lost 5 in a row, and you were down 20 halfway through the first half. It was a pretty miserable performance and a had-to-have-it moment. And so even though Matt McMahon's not going to be fired today, most people are looking and saying this feels like the end of the Matt McMahon era. And I certainly understand why you're asking that. It was an embarrassing home loss. And it feels like Matt McMahon's days probably are numbered. But the real question that we need to ask here is, can LSU actually fire Matt McMahon and move on? And I'm going to delve into this in a bit. Now, I want to be very transparent. I like Matt McMahon. I like him a lot. He has been professionally courteous, personally cordial. I think he's a great representative of LSU, of the program. He's been very generous with his time with me and the media over the 4 years he's been in Baton Rouge. He just hasn't won enough. And Matt McMahon inherited a very difficult situation where LSU was hit with sanctions and postseason ban and scholarship restrictions and all that stuff. And his first year at LSU sort of reflected that, right? He came over from Murray State, and that first year they went 14-19. They were just 2-16 in the league. It was terrible, but it's what you would have expected based on what he inherited. And what he inherited is why LSU had to give him a 7-year contract, which is atypical. But again, to get someone to take a job knowing they're taking a job with sanctions looming, you had to give them time. You had to promise them time and guarantees to leave a good situation to come to LSU. So that's why McMahon got a 7-year deal to leave Murray State. And listen, he was outstanding. His last year at Murray State, they were 31-3. They were undefeated in conference and made it to the round of 32 in the NCAA tournament when LSU hired him. So, there was a lot of reason to be excited about the Matt McMahon hire when you made it, but it just hasn't manifested. After that first year, year two, they went 17-16 overall, 9-9 in the league, which got them into the NIT. And then last year, when we thought, okay, year one was bad with the sanctions, year two, they made the NIT, year three, make that move, and the opposite happened. It unraveled. They finished 3-15 in the conference, 14-18 overall, and LSU and South Carolina were the only teams in the SEC not to make the NCAA tournament. Now, it's true that a season ago, the SEC was as deep, quite literally, as the league had ever been. You had 14 teams in the SEC make the NCAA tournament, including a 6-win Texas team. And that speaks to the depth and power of this conference, what it was a year ago. And so when it went so badly a year ago, there were a lot of people clamoring to move on from Matt McMahon. And I'll tell you, I was one that said, look, you got two options. You can fire Matt McMahon and pay that buyout and pay his staff, or you could take that money and invest it into the roster and give him an opportunity to go win and succeed. Like, see what it looks like actually when he has a roster capable of competing in the Southeastern Conference. And so they chose that path. They didn't fire Matt McMahon. They retained him, and they invested in this roster. Now, I'm not suggesting that LSU has $7 to $10 million in the basketball roster like Kentucky or Arkansas or Tennessee or Florida, some of the premier programs in this league do. But I would think it's fair to say they more than doubled the investment they had made a season ago, where they were around $2 million in that roster. So if you're in the $4 to $5 million range this year, thereabouts, you're at least in a position where you should be competitive. You should be able to get to the NCAA tournament. And that clearly is not going to happen with this team. And listen, we can lament some bad luck. You lost Jalen Reed for the second consecutive year. DJ Thomas missed, the first handful of games in conference play. If you have Thomas, maybe you win that opener against Texas A&M. If you have Thomas, maybe you beat Kentucky. What a rough, game that was, blowing that lead and losing on a buzzer beater. Those are heartbreaking plays and moments, and it just didn't go your way. The loss to Mississippi State is inexcusable at a spot on the schedule where you absolutely had to have it against a bad team at home, and showed. And they ran you out of your own gym, off your own floor. So that is why I think most people are having this conversation here today. I think, however, while moving on from Matt McMahon might be the answer, I think it's fair to say that he just may not be the right guy here to get this thing turned around. You're in year 4 and you haven't made the tournament, and you made an investment this year into this roster to get him there, and it's unraveled on you. And all that is fair to say, and I might even agree with that. I also think it is possible that LSU may not make that change. And I'll explain why as we continue here. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person, or you can connect online. And they handle everything from W-2s to self-employment forms, and they work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, you can go about your day and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. That's TurboTax.com/local. So many assume Matt McMahon will be done or think he should be done at LSU. Here's why he might not be. Even though Verge Ausberry gave that quote a few weeks ago saying Matt McMahon and LSU doesn't make the NCAA tournament, quote, we'll have to reevaluate. It's important to know that resources are finite. And yes, this is a financial component. If this was just about being competitive in basketball, then I think this would be an easy decision at the end of the season. But there are very real financial conversations that have to be had, and I'll spell these out for you. First of all, if you're going to buy out Matt McMahon after this season, you'd be talking about $7.5 million for McMahon, plus buying out his staff. So you're pushing $10 million to buy out Matt McMahon and his staff. Then you'd have to go hire a new coach, hire a new staff, and remember, you'd still have to pay for a roster. So what type of coach are you going to be able to attract without the commitment to investing in the roster through rev share and third-party NIL? You got to be able to be competitive. Just look at what happened with Matt McMahon. You're not going to take the job if you don't have the resources that are going to allow you to be competitive at this job. And compared to the conversation we just had with Brian Kelly's $54 million buyout, $10 million to buy out a basketball staff may not seem like much, but there still has to be an appetite. I think it's important to note the football investment has been massive. Not only are you paying Lane Kiffin, not only did you commit $54 million to buying out Brian Kelly plus his staff, you've committed $91 million to Lane Kiffin. You've also committed more to Lane Kiffin's staff, more than you had committed to Brian Kelly's staff. $3 million for Blake Baker, $2.5 for Charlie Weiss Jr. They have increased the amount of assistants, staffers, analysts coming over with Lane Kiffin or that they've hired. They have also, as I'm told, increased their recruiting and travel budget. In order to get Lane Kiffin away from Ole Miss, you had to promise him all of this investment and then deliver on it, and they are. But that is so expensive. And then on top of that, obviously, you have the roster that LSU just put together for football. And I'm here to tell you, they spent more than $40 million on this football roster. I'm not confident enough to tell you the exact number because there are, the way a lot of these contracts work, there are incentives built into some of these contracts that could have escalators. So I don't know exactly what that final number will be, but it will be more than $40 million for this year on that football roster. So you're talking about buying out Brian Kelly, hiring Lane Kiffin, increasing the amount of investment into the football staff and into the football budget, then paying more than $40 million for this football roster. You are looking around and going, at some point, like there's a line. At some point, you've spent enough. At some point, it's hard to justify making more of an investment into buying out coaches and throwing money at basketball. And on top of that, remember, you also have a huge financial investment into women's basketball with Kim Mulkey, who's making nearly $4 million a year, and Kim's demands for her roster to be good. And then you've got Jay Johnson, who's won 2 national titles in 3 years. You just gave Jay Johnson a raise. And of course, his roster needs to be built sufficient and enough to be able to compete for a national championship. All that to say, with all of the financial investment that you've made in football, that you have in women's basketball, that you have in baseball as well, can you really justify another $10 million to buy out Matt McMahon and his staff? Then plus, and on top of that, hire a new coach, new staff, and pay the basketball roster. It's the same question we asked a year ago. Would you be better off taking that money and investing it into the roster to keep improving your roster, as opposed to spending all of that money, just putting it in a pile, lighting a match to it, and burning it to make Matt McMahon go away, to then start over and make more of an investment to try to win? Now, I think, look, there was an appetite to move on from Brian Kelly. And because you had a strong emotional push from donors to move on, the money followed. I'm not sure there's that same energy among donors to pay that kind of money to move on from Matt McMahon. Because even with the change, even if you did move on from Matt McMahon, does the money from fan investment follow? Say it another way, if you fire Matt McMahon and hire a new coach, do you have such an injection of life and energy that you sell out the PMAC every game next year and donors start flooding money into the basketball program again? I'm not so sure that that's realistic. Let me address the Will Wade piece of this because I've already been asked, is Will Wade coming back? The answer flatly is no. If that were going to happen, it would have had to happen while he's at McNeese. He's at NC State right now. He's at a basketball school. He's at a place where they care and want him to be good at basketball. He signed a 6-year, $17 million contract at NC State. We're sitting here talking about if LSU is going to pay $10 million to buy out Matt McMahon and his staff. Do you really think then they're going to go? Will Wade's buyout, by the way, is $5 million. So if LSU wanted to hire Wade, first he'd have to want to leave a basketball school to come back to a place where he used to complain about water leaking in the practice facility. So you're going to pay $5 million. So he'd have to want to leave first, which I don't think he would, and then pay $5 million to get him out of his NC State contract, and then pay him. His salary caps at $325 at NC State. He's not going to leave for the same amount of money. You're going to bring back for $4.5 million. It doesn't financially make any sense. And plus, I don't know why Will Wade would even want to leave NC State. He's at a basketball school where they put value on that sport and that program, which LSU doesn't. We're as evidenced by the nature that we're having this conversation. So punt that idea of Will Wade. The only other part I would say to it is, can you afford not to make a change? Can you afford to allow men's basketball to continue to just exist and not really thrive? Listen, this always surprises people when we have this conversation, but there are only 2 sports on LSU's campus that make money: football and men's basketball. And the reason men's basketball largely makes money is you have premium seating and you have the media rights deal through the SEC. That's it. Every other sport loses money. Women's basketball loses $8 million a year. They're good under Kim Mulkey, but they lose $8 million a year. We could have the question, is it worth being good in women's basketball when you lose $8 million a year? Or would you not want to make that investment in women's basketball and instead give that money to the men's program to see if they can be more successful? Now, I think the women's basketball program is a loss leader. You're not going to make money, but the notoriety, the attention brings in more to the school and the athletic department than just the bottom line may suggest. I've always looked at men's basketball as someone who is a fan of that program and has been since I was a kid. I've told the story before. We moved to Baton Rouge from New Orleans in 1989. The football program was starting a string of 6 straight losing seasons that year in 1989. 89-90 with Shaq, Stanley, Chris. What a time to be introduced to men's basketball amid the 13 consecutive runs to the NCAA tournament. So I want the men's basketball program to be good. I know what it's like when they're good and how much energy there is around that building. And again, it feels like a massive wasted opportunity to have a revenue-generating sport, a sport that turns a profit for you, not maximized. If you make an appropriate investment, you can maximize it. So the question is, can you afford not to make that investment in basketball? Can you afford to allow basketball not to be good? And the answer so far has been yes. That was the answer a year ago, and it might be the answer again this year because, again, with all of the financial investment that these donors have made into football, with Brian Kelly's buyout, hiring Kiffin, his staff, the roster, all of it, I just don't know with a finite amount of resources if there's going to be a great appetite to spend that type of capital to make a coaching change in basketball. I just don't know that. While the basketball fans want change and want this program to be good, I think we all want the program to be good. The people that can actually affect that change, the people that are going to have to write those types of checks to make this change, I just don't know that there is an appetite for it today. Let's fast forward another month as we get through the end of February. And if this thing is still going off the rails and you're talking about a 3-4 win season in conference, Verge Ausberry may have no choice but to make that move and try to figure it out. But as of right now, what feels like an obvious answer of making a change may be more cumbersome to actually bring to fruition than it seems. As this plays out, we'll certainly keep you posted right here on Locked On LSU. So do me a favor. If you're on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app, rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And if I could ask a favor, if you do watch the show on YouTube, thank you so much, sincerely. But if you wouldn't mind, even if you watch the show on YouTube, which is amazing, if you would just jump onto your phone, go to your favorite podcast app, and just subscribe to the podcast, that would be a massive help. Even if you watch, if you would still subscribe to the podcast, it would be a massive help. It's how we get rated and shown to different people as they're searching for LSU podcasts. It would just be a massive help if you could do both. So thank you sincerely for that. Again, we'll keep you posted. So if you would let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.